families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Families Divided TV. Are maternal and paternal instincts innate? Do all parents have the capacity to love their children? It is generally assumed that built within their DNA, human mothers and fathers have a natural love for their offspring. Most narcissistic parents claim they love their children, sometimes even boast it. And parental alienators insist that they are only protecting their children that they love. But is it compassionate, devoted, unconditional love that drives their extreme behavior? Or is it depraved egotism, hate, or revenge? Why would a parent who truly loved their children turn them against their other loving parent and even their grandparents? Narcissistic abuse expert and coach Randi Fine is with us today in this episode to help alleviate the confusion that so many alienated parents and grandparents experience. We'll be hearing from her in just a moment. We're also going to hear from Megan Hunter. She will be presenting at our upcoming fall conference entitled Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and the Abuse. She is also going to be our moderator for this conference as well, and we're looking forward to having her. There's going to be 11 experts and professionals speaking at this conference from all over the world. This will be an international conference. It will be virtual because we're trying to help you guys save money from having to travel and such, and even with a lot of times the flights are getting messed up even still today. So we're still wanting to do everything we can to help you in every way that we can, and you really don't want to miss this 2.5-day event. It's going to be chock full from Friday night through Sunday night, with much going on and many things that will be in great value to you as an alienated family member, as well as you as a professional. So you do not want to miss this great event. We're also registering. We've been registering, and many have already registered and are very excited about it already. So I am hoping you'll go ahead and get registered, and we're looking forward to it. We're going to hear from Megan, and we're going to hear from Randi right after these messages.
Hi, everyone. I am really, really excited to be a part of this fantastic conference. I'm hoping that you will want to attend and learn so much more than you already know about to handle truly some of the most difficult and sometimes terrifying challenges and situations that we can ever have in life, dealing with alienation, right? So I'm Megan Hunter. I am the CEO and the co-founder of the High Conflict Institute, along with Bill Eddy, who is another speaker at this conference. He's really great, so I hope you'll listen to him too. What I'm going to talk about is whether there's a magic wand with alienation. I think we'd like to think that court is the magic wand. If I just can get into court and force this person or get the judge to explain or make an order that will solve all of this, we often can get in that mindset and think there's a magic wand. But instead, it might be more of a series of smaller steps that we have to take and be consistent in those steps, whether they're communication or other things that I'll be talking about. Now, on the rare occasion, there might be an individual, a parent, a grandparent, or other family member who sort of has a stroke of insight and says, okay, what I've been doing, turning this child, I didn't even realize I was turning this child against the other parent or against the grandparents or other family members. I've seen that happen very rarely. More often than not, they're not going to have that insight, and we can't expect that. We can pray for it, and we can do other things that influence it and that influence conflict. So in this workshop, I'm going to talk about some strategies such as verbal communication strategies. If you've heard me talk before, or Bill Eddy, you'll hear us talk every time about using ear statements, something with empathy, attention, and respect that's going to influence conflict. It's going to de-escalate. For written communication, emails, letters, text messages, DMs, any kind of written communication, we use what's called the BIF response, something that's brief, informative, friendly, and firm. It extracts all of the conflict and will de-escalate and stop all of the back and forth. What do these two things result in? They result in calming conflict. They result in extracting conflict from an otherwise high conflict situation. I'll also be talking about some stress-reducing techniques for you, because I know that cases such as these are really hard on our health and our well-being and our mental health. And so learning some stress-reducing techniques can be very helpful. I'm not going to teach you how to breathe. You already know how to do that, and there are others who can explain those techniques far greater than I can. But for these really challenging cases, I might have some helpful techniques. We're going to talk about challenging your own assumptions and trying to look at things from many different perspectives. How to approach people who don't like you very much. You're at that school play together, or you have to now go to the wedding or the graduation and see people that don't like you. And maybe you don't like them. So how can we approach that situation? And then kind of identifying your own conflict strengths and weaknesses, and making adjustments where necessary. We'll touch on all of those things. These are things that I've used in my own life, and I've seen many, many other people use them very successfully. So I hope you'll come to the conference and learn so much from all of the speakers, and hopefully get some very meaningful, game-changing information for yourself. So I hope to see you there.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Hi, my name is Randi Fine, and I am a narcissistic abuse expert and coach. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is actually a question I get asked all the time by my clients, and that is, do narcissistic parents truly love their children? Well, I'm not going to give you the answer yet. I'm going to explain to you why I say what I say. So, reproduction is an instinct that's given to all living things to perpetuate their species. And many organisms with offspring are not in charge of the aftercare of the offspring. They're young. For those that are, the job is to protect and give tools for survival until that offspring can do it for themselves. So that is the job of every human parent. But the job is so much more than just that. Human parents are responsible to prepare their children, not just for survival, but for success. And this is not an easy thing to do, and it is not a brief thing to do. This lasts an entire lifetime. It is often assumed, really largely assumed, that women have maternal instincts and fathers have paternal instincts. And we want to believe that, especially when they take on the role of parenting. But this is not true with narcissists, because a narcissist takes on a role of what it needs, and what it needs is narcissistic supply: adoration, adulation, and attention. And attention can be negative or positive. But a mother who is a narcissist is not a mother. It's a narcissist who has taken on the persona of a mother, because having children and having a spouse or a partner is captive supply for them. So they take on this role. So we would think that a mother that has children is naturally maternal, but that's not true. It is a narcissist. And the same goes for the father. It's not a father. It doesn't have paternal instincts. It's a narcissist in the role of father, because just as the mother does, this gets the father supply. So let's talk about what parental love truly is. Parental love is patient, reliable, selfless, warm, affectionate, caring, comforting, concerning, nurturing, supportive, secure, and without conditions. This is the kind of love that children need to grow and to thrive. But any child that is born into the convoluted domain of a narcissistic parent will have a steep uphill climb through life, because narcissists don't love their children in a healthy way. They love their children in a perverted type of love that is based on selfish neediness. And rather than raise their children to grow up and be healthy, successful adults, what they do is they objectify them, they dehumanize them, they treat them as if they're pawns on a chessboard. And what children will experience in these environments is emotional, psychological, spiritual, sexual, maybe even physical abuse. Not all of them, maybe one or more. So we know that this is not a good environment. The child of a narcissistic parent is considered an extension of them. They feel as if the child is theirs. They own the child. And so what they do is they assign roles to fulfill their wishes and needs. And the children are meant to perform and conform to these standards. There are roles that the narcissistic parent assigns, and there are roles that children take on themselves. So you may have heard about a lot of different roles, but I'm going to talk about the ones that narcissistic parents assign their children. And let me just first say that children only have value if they're visibly flawless. Sometimes it doesn't matter if they're emotionally or mentally flawless, but visibly flawless is a mark on their reputation. They can't deal with that. So we have the golden child, the scapegoat child, the invisible child. There is only one golden child at a time, and the job of the golden child is to reflect what that parent thinks is perfect about them. So this child is their reflection of perfection. And the child can never do wrong, because if they do wrong, it's as if the parent does wrong. Then you have scapegoat child. Now, there can be more than one scapegoat child. There can only be one golden child. And the scapegoat child can change, as can all the other roles, which I'll explain in a minute. But the scapegoat child's job is they are the dumping ground for all the narcissistic parents' angst, frustration, anger, whatever they don't like, and they have to throw off themselves, repel, that goes on to the scapegoat child. So the child from birth is assigned this role, and they are the dumping ground for everything the parent doesn't like. The invisible child, there's not always an invisible child, but the invisible child is one, they really don't get noticed. Sometimes they're abandoned, but they basically take a background to everything else. And they're the ones who get very quiet. They don't want to have a presence in that family. And this is very damaging, as are all the roles. Now, the golden child, they only stay golden as long as they conform and perform. Should they let that parent down, they're knocked off their throne and someone else will be put there. Sometimes it is another sibling. Sometimes it will be somebody outside the family. It's always different. But the treatment of a child raised in these environments is cruel-hearted, hazardous, destructive. In fact, it's criminal. It's probably the worst thing that can happen to a child. And people will say to me, well, they weren't physically abused. And physical abuse is horrible. Emotional abuse can be worse because it's below the radar. The child doesn't know what's happening to them. And this goes on for their entire childhood and sometimes beyond that. Narcissists often say they love their children, or they tell their children that they do. And they can be very convincing when they do this. But what they're really doing is mimicking display of a foreign emotion that they have never felt. They don't know what love is. Because someone with narcissistic personality disorder does not have the capability of loving or feeling empathy towards another. This is not a choice. This is the nature of the personality disorder. They do not know what love is. And therefore, the love that they may try to mimic may be very inconsistent. The words don't match the actions. But they are really incapable of loving another. Parents who love their children don't set up ever-changing conditions for receiving it. With the narcissistic parent, nothing is stable or permanent. Privileges and gifts that are given can just as easily be taken away. Children can never rest on emotional safety. And for this reason, they stay hypervigilant. They must be hyper-aware of the changes in the energy in their environment so that they can anticipate what is about to come. And they do get very energetically sensitive. They're subject to surprise attacks. These things come out of nowhere. And they make one false move and the rug is pulled out from under them. But children want the love of both parents, even when one parent is clearly giving them unconditional love and one parent is clearly giving them conditions that constantly change. But they have no other reference point, these children, and they want the love of both parents. And to accept the fact that one parent doesn't really love them would crush their world, because children don't have the capability, the coping mechanisms to deal with something this heavy, this deep. And so they're willing to take scraps and crumbs from the narcissistic parent in order to keep that relationship going. And what they do is they live in a state of denial because they cannot look this right in the eye. It's impossible. They always know that the other parent loves them, whether or not they express that as happens with parental alienation or not, is another story. But they know who loves them and they know who does not. Children are groomed basically from birth, gradually, with narcissistic control tactics and brainwashing tactics. And these are very, very deep-seated. The children are not aware of this. And it comes on very slowly and very gradually. So even by the time the child is 1 or 2 years old, they've already been programmed as to what is expected of them, and they just know it. The narcissistic parent uses the victim mentality to pull those children in closer. They act as if they have nobody cares about them, they're lonely, so forth and so on. And then children feel very bad about that, and they want to make it right. They want to make that parent happy. And so it becomes their job to make that parent happy. There are some specific tactics that are used on children by narcissistic parents. And one you may have noticed, because this happens a lot with parental alienation, is adultification. This is where the narcissistic parent treats the child as if they are a peer. They share things with the child that should not be shared, that's way over their level of maturity. They give them privileges that no child should really have. They let them stay up late. They let them pretty much guide their own life. And of course, children like this. And then when they go to the other parent, they don't have that. And a lot of resentment happens as a result of this. So that's called adultification. The narcissistic parent creates immense guilt in the child. The messages to the children are, you are responsible for my happiness. And the children truly believe that. Not all children will. Some are clearer than others. But there's always one child that really buys into this. They gaslight the child. I'm sure you've heard about gaslighting. Gaslighting is when the child is told they didn't see what they saw, they didn't hear what they heard, what happened didn't happen. And this is crazy making, because they know what they see, they know what they hear, and then they're told it didn't happen. So then they begin to distrust their own judgment and intuition, and they're not really sure. And as a result of this, they're at the mercy of the parent to tell them who they are. There are engulfing parents and ignoring parents. And first I'm going to talk about the engulfing parents. This is where the narcissistic parent merges psychologically, emotionally, mentally with the child. And this is not necessarily a problem for a very young child. It becomes a problem when that child begins to forge a strong identity, which usually happens in adolescence. And at that time, the parent becomes envious of anything that takes that child away from them. They are kept enmeshed and dependent using 4 primary tactics. Parentification, which is the reversal of parental-child roles. Emotional incest, which is a one-sided sexualized relationship without sex. There's no sex involved, but that child is a surrogate spouse. Infantilization, which is where the narcissist will keep that child from maturing by speaking for the child all the time, by not letting the child learn how to take care of themselves, by speaking in this sing-song voice that you would speak to a young child. And they basically hold this child back. And then there's triangulation, which is a control and manipulation tactic, it's about balancing the power in the family system, the narcissist wants to be at the center of all communication. Everything has to revolve around them. So all these things are being used on children who are being engulfed. An ignoring parent is one who terrorizes and isolates the children. They don't care. They don't pretend to. They neglect the child or children. What they'll do is they'll often do enough so that the outside of the home, they look like they're good parents. They do enough to show that they're good parents. Not all of them do. Some of them really neglect the children. But children understand that their family operates by a set of unspoken rules, and they know they must adhere to the agenda. They are supposed to keep quiet. They're supposed to keep secrets. They're supposed to accept scraps. And they're supposed to internalize whatever they're told. So this is programming. This is brainwashing. And the children do not have a choice in this matter, because where are they going to go? They're dependent on this parent, these narcissistic parents. And in cases where parents are together, it's not really much different, because the other parent becomes an enabling spouse, and they have their own agenda to keeping themselves out of trouble with their spouse. But in situations where there's a divorce or a separation, there's often parental alienation, and children are terrified to cross that other parent. They don't say it. They won't verbalize that in most cases. What I've found in my practice over the years and the many people that I've seen is that in a family where there's more than one child, only one child really gets out. And by that I mean one child somehow sees through this or grows up and realizes it, and it's so incredibly difficult to tolerate that they get help. But what happens in these families is that when one child wants to get out, the other children go in closer, because what they want, there's very little love to go around. So when one child sort of pulls out and tries to heal, the other ones want their scraps, and they tend to get closer into the narcissist. So this is why in most cases that I see, only one child really rises above this. But living like this causes children to develop what's called maladaptive coping mechanisms, because children don't have the ability to cope with life unless they're taught how to do this by their parents. And narcissistic parents do not give them any skills for life, because they basically want to paralyze that child so the child will never leave, emotionally and psychologically paralyze them. But what happens with children in these environments, there's different ways that they cope. And like I said, these are maladaptive coping mechanisms, meaning they're not healthy, but they're good enough to get them through the years that they need to be dependent on their parents. So some of the things that happen, children become people pleasers. Some children dissociate. They just leave their minds because they can't tolerate what's happening, and they just escape it that way. Many of the children put up walls. These are internal places to hide, since there's no external places to hide. Some make themselves smaller or try to be invisible. Many of them develop complexes. And the very worst case situation is when a child in these environments develops a personality disorder, such as narcissistic personality disorder. The other maladaptive coping mechanisms will be taken into adulthood, and they won't function very well for them as adults. but they can be changed. Once a child takes on the personality disorder of a narcissist, that is for life. It doesn't change because the nature of the disorder is that they cannot see that there's anything wrong with them. There is no insight, no introspection, nothing. And if you don't have that, you can't get better. So in very severe cases, children may develop personality disorders. There are other personality disorders that can develop, but I'm here to talk about narcissistic specifically because that's where my expertise is. Okay. So when there's a divorce between a narcissistic spouse and another spouse, the narcissist will say that they love their children. They'll act like they do. As a matter of fact, where they really showed very little care and consideration to the children, all of a sudden they become parent of the year. And this is a display for everyone else. Behind closed doors, they're not this way. But in front of other people who don't really know them and know what's going on behind closed doors, and the children are silenced, they cannot say a word about what goes on, or they get severely reprimanded. So they will say that they love the children. In legal cases, they will say that they love the children more than the other parent loves the children, that they're more capable of taking care of the children. But as I said earlier, narcissists don't have the capability to love. And you can't fake love with a child. Children know if they're loved and if they're not loved. And when they're with a narcissistic parent, they're not loved. But often they're stuck with that parent because that parent has been able to influence the system in such a way that the parent who truly loves them has been alienated. But this is where you see that father and mother of the year. They go to school. These are parents who never really were involved in the parent-teacher association. All of a sudden, they're going to all the meetings. They're the president. They're going volunteering at school. I'm sorry. They're volunteering at school, and they're taking those children everywhere they can. They want it to look good, but it's not really love. And this is not about love. This is about punishing the other parent. Children are taken as surrogates. And what they are is the continued narcissistic supply for that narcissistic parent. Because they must provide lots of supply, adoration, adulation, and attention. They must provide this for that parent. They cannot fall down on this job at all. If they do, they lose their position. They get, the parent is displeased and the child is treated horribly. And there's raging and there's punishing, irrational kind of behavior. Another thing that they'll do is narcissistic parents will push a child's button so many times. They just push it and push it because they want that child to react. Narcissists feed on emotion and reaction. When they push our buttons, when they upset us, it's because they want us to react. They cannot thrive without our reaction. This is food for them. And so with children, they're doing everything that they can to push their buttons because they want reactions. They want the love. They want the attention. They want the adoration, the adulation. But there's no love. It's not love. And if you are in a situation where you have a child coming home to you from a narcissistic parent and they're crying or they're saying to you, Daddy doesn't love me, Mommy doesn't love me. You know, sometimes we want to soothe these children and we want to make them feel better. And we'll say things like, oh, yes, of course your father loves you. Of course your mother loves you. My advice to you is never to say that. It's really not your responsibility to say that. And it's very important that the child knows they have at least one parent they can fully trust. And when you say, of course, that other parent loves you, they know you're lying. And you don't want to do that. All you say is, I am so sorry you're hurting. I wish there was something I could do. And just know I will always be there for you. No matter what, I will always be there for you. So you can't mask the fact that the other parent doesn't love them. And you shouldn't. So will all children in these environments see it? Well, the truth is some will and some won't. And like I said earlier, some children have this ability to see through things. They just kind of cut through it. Some children see it from a very young age. Some children, it takes years for them to really recognize it. But when they do, they want out, or they want away, or they want to fix it. Not all children are going to recognize the fact that they're not loved. And no matter how much the other parent shows them love, there's still a divide, a splitting that happens with the child where they absolutely cannot see that the narcissistic parent, what they are doing is not love, even when it is obviously abusive. We know about children who are physically abused. They don't reject their parents, they want their parents more. And this is the situation with the narcissist. The child wants the parent who is abusing them even more. They try harder and harder and harder because they cannot cope with the fact that that parent does not love them. Psychologically, they cannot deal with that. And many adults can't deal with that as well. So why do I do this work? I just want to tell you that I am the daughter of a narcissistic mother. So I grew up in a family with 3 children with a narcissistic mother, but I did not recognize it till I was 42 years old. And this is very typical. Usually it's mid-40s, 50s, where people all of a sudden, they've been putting up with it for years, and all of a sudden they can't tolerate it, and they don't know what's wrong. So that was my situation. I was the golden child. I was highly objectified. I had 2 sisters who were emotionally abused in the very worst way, and my father was abused. So this is what I grew up watching. And when I began my healing journey, this was many years ago, and there was no computer. There was no Google search. And I had to find my way to healing, which I did by myself. And it was a long journey and a very arduous journey. But through those years, I learned so much. And I studied, I researched, I learned everything about this disorder. And then I was able to help other people. And this is a wonderful thing that I can do because it makes everything that I went through worth it, in a sense, the fact that I can give this to others. So if you have that question, does the narcissistic parent love their children? Hands down, the answer is no, they do not. And I'm sorry to say that. It's very sad, but they do not. So where do you go from here? Well, that's where you need professional help. You need to seek the help of a professional therapist or a coach like me or anyone that does this work that can really help you navigate this process and figure out where to go next. And I'm available if you ever want to reach out. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Sadly, too many know the pain and trauma associated with parental and grandparent alienation. Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, will present an important international virtual conference on October the 13th through the 15th, 2023. The conference, entitled Alienation, The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse, will feature world-renowned experts in the field of alienation. You'll join the conference event coordinator, Elaine Cobb, and moderator, Megan Hunter, as they introduce you to keynote speaker Dr. Edward Kruk. Plus, you'll hear important presentations from Dr. Joshua Coleman, Lisa Rothfuss, Dr. Mary Alvarez, Chris Smith, Bill Eddy, Dr. Noel Hunter, Dr. Sue Kornblum, Dr. William Burnett, Megan Hunter, and Jordan Traeger. Join the many attendees already securing their spot for the conference entitled Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. For information, visit familyaccess.info for all the details. The special conference is being hosted by Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, Steel Partners Foundation, and PASCA, Parental Alienation is Child Abuse.
Next week on Families Divided TV, Dr. Sue Kornbluth, Lisa Rothfuss, and Chris Smith have a panel discussion on a team approach to family law.